Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to dive into an unexpected truth, how kindness, something we often see as an absolute virtue, can actually backfire. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive. We've all been taught that kindness is the key to building meaningful relationships, fostering connections, and creating a better world. But what happens when kindness goes too far? When it's given without boundaries or without awareness of its impact? Let's explore the 4 ways kindness in its extreme can hurt US. When we talk about kindness and generosity, we often think of them as pure, noble qualities that create strong connections with others and build trust. And for the most part, they do. Kindness and generosity can be powerful forces in the world, but there's an important caveat that we must consider when we give without limits, when we offer our time, energy, resources, and love without any boundaries. People can start to take advantage of us. At first, this might not be obvious. The people we help may express their gratitude, and we may feel a sense of fulfillment or satisfaction in knowing that we've made a positive impact in someone's life. It's what we expect when we choose to be generous that our kindness will be met with appreciation, respect, and maybe even return when we need it most. But over time, something shifts. Our generosity becomes something people begin to expect. Think about it. When you consistently give without asking for anything in return, others may start to take it for granted. They stop seeing your generosity as a gift and begin to see it as something they deserve, something that's always available to them. This is where exploitation begins. It's not always malicious sometimes. People don't even realize they're doing it. But when we constantly put the needs of others ahead of our own, when we give away our time and energy without setting any boundaries, we open the door for others to take advantage of us. Let me give you an example. Think about a situation at work or in your personal life where you've been the go-to person for solving problems. You're always the one who steps up to lend a hand, to cover for someone, to offer advice or solutions. At first, this feels good. You're helping others and you're seen as dependable, kind, and selfless. But what happens when it's always you who steps up? Over time, people begin to expect this from you. They may stop asking you if you're available because they know you'll say yes. They stop considering whether you're already stretched thin or dealing with your own personal struggles because your kindness has created an environment where your help is taken for granted. This cycle of giving without pause can lead to resentment. You may find yourself exhausted, emotionally drained, and frustrated because despite all the effort you've put in, no one is offering their help when you need it. The kindness you once offered freely now feels like an obligation, something that drains you rather than energizes you. In this situation, you've become so accustomed to giving that you forget the importance of preserving your own resources, whether they be time, energy, or emotional bandwidth. The people who rely on you might never notice how much it costs you to give, and they may not think twice before asking for more. This sense of exploitation isn't always a conscious act of manipulation, but it can still leave you feeling used. In the worst cases, people may take advantage of your generosity with no intention of ever reciprocating. They might ask for more and more and more, knowing that you won't say no. And if you do start saying no, they might try to guilt you or make you feel bad for not helping. But you've always been there for me, they might say. How could you not help now? This is a dangerous dynamic. When you let people exploit your generosity, you're teaching them that your value lies only in what you give. They don't see you as a whole person with your own needs and boundaries. They see you as a resource to be tapped into whenever it's convenient for them. The more you give, the more they take, and eventually you may feel like you've given away so much of yourself that there's nothing left. So, how do we prevent this from happening? How do we protect ourselves from being exploited while still maintaining our kindness and generosity? The key is understanding that true generosity comes from a place of balance. It's about giving freely, but also knowing when to say no, when to step back, and when to prioritize your own needs. Generosity is not about giving until it hurts. It's about giving from a place of abundance, knowing that you're taking care of yourself first. Setting boundaries is critical. It's not about being selfish. It's about being self-aware and ensuring that your generosity is sustainable. When you say yes, make sure it's because you genuinely have the time and energy to help, not because you feel obligated or guilty. Be mindful of the energy you're giving and recognize when you need to recharge. When you do this, you create a space for your kindness to flourish without feeling exploited or drained. Generosity should feel empowering, not depleting. It's not about constantly sacrificing yourself for others. It's about sharing your time and energy with intention and awareness. And when you give from a place of balance, people will come to respect not only your kindness, but also your boundaries, and they'll learn that your generosity is a gift, not an entitlement. Ultimately, kindness and generosity should never feel like a burden. They should feel like a choice, a beautiful, fulfilling choice. But that choice must be made with awareness of the cost. If we're constantly giving without regard to the impact it has on us, we risk being exploited, feeling resentful, and losing the very essence of what made our kindness valuable in the first place. The goal is to give with grace, but also with wisdom and a deep understanding of our own needs. That's when generosity becomes not just a gift to others, but a gift to ourselves as sown. Of the most subtle and damaging ways kindness can negatively impact your life is when we begin to neglect our own needs for the sake of others. This happens when we prioritize the well-being, comfort, or happiness of others at the expense of our own. We live in a world that often tells us that selflessness is a virtue, that to be truly kind, we must put ourselves last. But there's a serious flaw in this mindset. While it's certainly noble to care for others, it is equally important to care for yourself. At first, it may seem harmless to put others first. In fact, it may feel empowering. When we help give and serve others, it's natural to feel a sense of purpose or fulfillment. But over time, if we continue to ignore our own needs, we risk losing touch with who we are and what we truly need to feel healthy, happy, and whole. We start to feel drained, both emotionally and physically. We might even feel resentment but not understand where it's coming from, because we've convinced ourselves that our role in life is to give always and without exception. This is especially common among those who are caregivers, parents, partners, friends, or even professionals in helping roles. These individuals often devote so much time and energy to taking care of others that they forget to take care of themselves. They might cancel their own plans, push their personal goals aside, or ignore their emotional or physical needs, believing that it's selfish to focus on themselves. And while it's not wrong to care for others, neglecting your own well-being can lead to burnout, frustration, and a sense of emptiness that no amount of helping others can fill. Here's where it gets dangerous when we neglect our own needs. We start to lose our sense of identity. We begin to define ourselves by what we do for others rather than by who we are as individuals. We may start to feel invisible, as though our value is only tied to the things we give and the ways we serve. This is a danger cycle, because when you lose touch with your own needs and desires, you lose the ability to truly enjoy life, to engage with your own passions, and to feel content in your own skin. You're constantly running on empty, hoping that someday you'll have the time or energy to focus on yourself. Moreover, this neglect can lead to feelings of resentment, not only toward others, but also toward yourself. You may start to feel like you're constantly giving and never getting back, even though you're too exhausted to give more. These feelings can manifest in different ways: irritability, anger, or even withdrawal. The truth is, you can't keep giving if you're not also receiving. Generosity without boundaries isn't sustainable. It's a cycle that eventually leads to burnout. When you neglect your own needs, you also risk compromising your health, both mental and physical. For example, if you're constantly working to help others, you might start sacrificing sleep, skipping meals, or not taking time to exercise. Over time, these small sacrifices compound, and your body starts to wear down. Mentally, you may start to feel overwhelmed, stressed, or anxious because your mind is always focused on others' problems, leaving little room for your own peace of mind. In relationships, neglecting your needs can also create an imbalance of power. If you're always the one giving and never receiving, it can lead to resentment and frustration. You may begin to feel unappreciated, as though your contributions are being taken for granted. The people you're helping may not even realize the toll it's taking on you, and you might not express it because you don't want to appear selfish. This leads to a cycle where your needs go unspoken, and eventually you may feel unimportant or invisible, which creates a sense of emotional isolation. So, what can we do to stop neglecting ourselves for others? The first step is to understand that it's not selfish to take care of yourself, it's necessary. Self-care is not just about bubble baths or taking time off, it's about setting boundaries, recognizing your limits, and making sure you're attending to your physical, emotional, and mental needs. It's about being able to say no when you need to and asking for help when you need it. It's about creating space in your life for your own passions, rest, and well-being. Setting boundaries is crucial here. Boundaries are the framework that keeps us from giving so much that we lose ourselves. They help us navigate the delicate balance between caring for others and caring for ourselves. Saying no doesn't make you unkind, it makes you honest about your limits. Prioritizing your own needs doesn't mean you're ignoring others, it means you're showing up for them in a way that's sustainable and healthy. When you take care of yourself, you show up as the best version of yourself for those you love and care for. Remember, your worth is not tied to how much you give to others. You are valuable because of who you are, not because of what you do for others. You don't have to constantly sacrifice your own happiness to make others happy. True kindness comes from a place of wholeness, and in order to feel whole, you must first nurture yourself. So if you're feeling burned out, frustrated, or invisible, it might be time to stop and ask, what am I neglecting in my own life, whether it's your health, your dreams, your emotional well-being, or simply your need for rest? It's time to start prioritizing yourself. By doing so, you'll not only restore balance to your life, but you'll also find that you're able to give more freely and joyfully to others without depleting yourself. It's not about being selfish, it's about being healthy, whole, and able to give from a place of abundance. Boundaries are the invisible lines we draw to protect our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. They define who we are, what we're comfortable with, and how we expect to be treated by others. And while they might not always be visible to others, they are critical to maintaining our health, happiness, and integrity. Boundaries are an essential part of healthy relationships, whether with family, friends, coworkers, or even strangers. However, when we fail to recognize and reinforce the idea that our needs aren't important, or that they don't deserve to be prioritized, and when this happens repeatedly, our emotional and physical resources become depleted, and we lose the ability to say no without feeling guilty or selfish. For example, think about a situation at work where you're asked to take on an extra project. At first, you agree because you want to be helpful and you don't want to let anyone down. But then another request comes and another until you're overwhelmed, stressed, and stretched too thin. You may start to feel that it's expected of you to always say yes, that to be helpful. To be kind, you must put your own needs aside. Over time, people will start to expect this from you, and they may even take it for granted. When your boundaries are no longer visible or respected, your role shifts from that of a team member to that of a perpetual giver, someone who is always available but never takes time to recharge. This erosion of boundaries doesn't just affect your workload or your time, it affects your emotional well-being. You may begin to feel resentment and frustration because you're constantly giving without getting back. You may start to feel taken advantage of, and that feeling will only grow if your boundaries continue to be ignored. When others know they can always rely on you, they stop considering whether you have the capacity or the desire to help. And without clear communication of your limits, it becomes harder and harder to express when you're overwhelmed or when you need time for yourself. The real danger here is that the longer you let your boundaries erode, the more you lose a sense of self-respect. You may start to see your own needs as less important than others' needs, and you may even feel guilty for wanting to prioritize yourself. The more you say yes when you really want to say no, the more you reinforce the idea that you don't have the right to take up space, to demand respect for your time and energy. Eventually, you may feel like you have no control over your life, as if you're simply a passive participant in a world where others dictate your actions and choices. This can lead to burnout. Emotional and physical exhaustion are often the result of persistent boundary erosion. When we continually overcommit ourselves, whether in personal relationships or professional settings, we risk losing our ability to function at our best. We may feel mentally foggy, emotionally numb, or even physically unwell because we've drained our resources to the point of depletion. And when we're burned out, we can't show up as the person we truly want to be, either for ourselves or for others. The erosion of boundaries also leads to a breakdown in relationships. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, and one of the foundational aspects of that respect is recognizing and honoring boundaries. When one person's boundaries are constantly ignored or violated, the relationship becomes imbalanced. The person whose boundaries have been neglected may start to feel resentful, unappreciated, or invisible, which ultimately leads to dissatisfaction, frustration, and even disengagement. They may begin to withdraw or shut down emotionally, creating distance where there once was connection. This requires self-reflection and a deep understanding of our needs. What makes us feel comfortable, respected, and valued? What takes up too much of our time or energy? Once we have a clear sense of our own boundaries, we can begin to communicate them with others. This may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we've been accustomed to saying yes to everything. But the more we practice setting boundaries, the easier it becomes. We also need to be prepared for pushback. Not everyone will respect our boundaries right away, and some people may even try to test or violate them. This is where assertiveness comes in. Being assertive means clearly expressing our needs and standing firm in the face of resistance. We must be willing to say no when necessary and to communicate our limits in a way that's respectful but firm. We don't have to apologize for taking care of ourselves. It's also essential to recognize when it's time to say no. It's okay to turn down requests that don't align with your priorities or that will stretch you beyond your capacity. Saying no isn't a rejection of the person asking, it's a way of protecting your energy so you can show up fully for the things that matter most to you. When we protect our boundaries, we protect our sense of self-worth, our energy, and our ability to engage meaningfully with the world. Boundaries are an act of self-care, not selfishness, and they help us maintain balance in our lives, ensuring that we have the resources to give when it's right and the space to rest when we need it. By respecting our own boundaries, we create healthier, more sustainable relationships with ourselves and others, and we preserve the very kindness and generosity we wish to share with the world. One of the most powerful aspects of kindness is its ability to be given freely, without expecting anything in return. It's this selfless nature of kindness that often makes it so impactful. We've all heard the phrase, it's better to give than to receive, and there's a deep truth in that. Kindness, when offered without strings attached, can create genuine connections and foster goodwill. However, while this unconditional generosity can make a difference in the lives of others, there's an important caveat when kindness is extended without the understanding that not all acts will be reciprocated or recognized. It can sometimes lead to deep disappointment. The reason disappointment can arise from giving kindness without expectation is that even though we may be giving selflessly, we still have human emotions and needs. We long for connection, validation, and acknowledgement. When we are kind to others, it's natural to hope that our kindness will be met with gratitude, understanding, or even returned at some point. And while that might happen sometimes, there will inevitably be times when it doesn't. And that's where the potential for disappointment lies. We might give without expecting anything, but we're still vulnerable to the emotional impact of not receiving what we hope for, even if we don't articulate it. Maybe it's a simple thank you that never comes. Maybe it's a favor or gesture that goes unnoticed, leaving us to question whether our kindness even mattered. And even though we understand in our rational minds that kindness is meant to be its own reward, in our hearts we might still feel hurt when the recipient of our kindness doesn't acknowledge it, or worse, takes it for granted. This kind of unreciprocated kindness can erode our sense of self-worth. When we give generously without ever seeing it returned, we can start to wonder if our kindness even matters. We might start to feel unappreciated, invisible, or even taken for granted. For example, you might always be the one to reach out to a friend who's going through a tough time, offering emotional support in your time. But when you need support, they might be nowhere to be found. After a while, this one-sided effort can lead to feelings of frustration, disappointment, and even bitterness. The kindness you gave, which was once a source of joy, can now feel like a burden that was never reciprocated. If we continually give expecting something in return, even subconsciously, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment. This is where the balance lies. True kindness is about giving without a hidden agenda, without placing conditions on the recipient's response. But if we've internalized the idea that kindness should always be reciprocated, we risk being let down when it isn't. Furthermore, giving kindness without expectation can sometimes lead to a lack of emotional protection. When we give, especially to those we deeply care about, we are often making ourselves vulnerable. There's a vulnerability in extending kindness to others because at a core level, we are opening ourselves to the possibility that it might not be received in the way we hope or at all. And that vulnerability, when ignored, can sometimes lead to emotional harm. We might feel that in our efforts to be selfless, we've allowed ourselves to be exposed to rejection, or worse, to be taken advantage of. So what do we do to navigate the potential disappointment that comes with kindness without expectation? The first step is acknowledging that, even though we give without strings attached, we are still human. We have feelings, needs, and desires. It's okay to want recognition or reciprocity, but it's important to understand that these desires should not be the driving force behind your kindness. When you give from a place of authenticity, without the expectation of anything in return, it frees you from the potential weight of disappointment. By releasing the expectation of reciprocity, we can continue to give generously without holding on to the notion that others will always repay us in kind. This shift in perspective doesn't mean we stop hoping for kindness or appreciation. It simply means that we begin to give for the sake of giving, not to get something in return. It's about learning to find joy in the act itself, in the moment of connection, rather than in the anticipation of a reward. When we reframe our kindness in this way, it allows us to let go of disappointment. The recognition and reciprocation, if they come, are simply added gifts. They are not the reason we give in the first place. Additionally, we must also learn to balance our giving with the recognition that not all acts of kindness will be received in the way we expect. Not everyone will show appreciation in the way we think they should, and that's okay. People are complex, and sometimes their response to kindness is shaped by their own experiences, struggles, and limitations. Understanding this can help mitigate the emotional impact of unreciprocated kindness. It's not that your kindness wasn't appreciated, it's just that the other person may not have been in a place to express their gratitude or to give back in the way you hoped. In relationships, it's also important to communicate openly about your needs and feelings. If you feel that your kindness is being taken for granted or that it's not being reciprocated, it's essential to express this with honesty and compassion. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and understanding. And that includes the understanding that both people's needs should be considered. In the end, kindness without expectation is one of the most powerful and transformative acts we can engage in. It can enrich our lives, build strong relationships, and foster a sense of community. But to avoid the disappointment that sometimes accompanies it, we must learn to give with an open heart without attaching ourselves to specific outcomes. Kindness, when offered freely, is its own reward. When we let go of the expectation of receiving something in return, we open ourselves to the true joy of giving without disappointment or regret. In conclusion, kindness is a gift, a force that has the potential to create connection, healing, and positive change. But like any powerful force, it requires mindfulness, balance, and a healthy understanding of our own needs and limits. Kindness, when given freely and with love, can transform lives. But it's important to remember that it should not come at the expense of our own well-being. The key is in knowing how to give without depleting ourselves, to offer our kindness without expectation, but also with an awareness of our worth and needs. As we continue to spread kindness, let's also remember that it's okay to protect our boundaries, to acknowledge when we need something in return, and to realize that not every act of kindness will come back to us in the way we hope. True kindness is found not only in what we give, but in how we take care of ourselves while we do it. So let's go forward with hearts full of kindness, but let's do so with wisdom, knowing that the greatest gift we can offer the world is not just generosity, but a generous love for ourselves as well. In the end, kindness is not about what we do for others, but about how we show up in the world with authenticity, compassion, and an unwavering respect for our own needs. Thank you.